Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being the show where we talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Soulmates. A great episode, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. This is actually like a very heavy, very dark and sad episode. Like I said, what I mean, like every episode, they're kind of flipping the genre a little bit to a certain extent. Especially, but it's just kind of like I said, the last episode was kind of a romance comedy. This episode's kind of a straight up drama, sad, depressing drama to a certain extent. But it was kind of interesting because once again, every episode kind of showcases the different sides to this whole soulmate situation. That it isn't just how obviously it impacts different people's lives, and we see that basically there's a group of people. I mean, and I guess statistically it would happen, people who lost their soulmates, because obviously in this episode we meet Kurt, who's played by Charlie Heaton. The thing I best know him for is playing Jonathan from Stranger Things, so that was pretty interesting. But basically his soulmate Heather had died in a car accident, and so basically he's in this support group for people who lost their soulmates. I was like, that's so interesting, because and obviously we've seen how people have had an attachment to this, because it's like, this is your soulmate, this is the person you're meant to be with, this is going to be your that person's going to become your everything. They're kind of complete you in a sense, and for that person to be dead, and just how hard that can hit you, especially if you've never really had that connection with someone, but then you find out this is, because it's another thing, especially because this is a person you never got to meet. You got to meet them after the fact. You never really got to meet them, get to know them. So, in Kurt's case, he got to know Heather after the fact, learn about her after the fact, after she was already gone. And so it's just like that thing of all that you dream, because he was like, yeah, I don't think about her anymore. He's like, I used to think about her a lot, about where we could be, because obviously Heather was an adventurer. She kind of vlogged everything that she was doing, and she was going all these different places, doing all these different things. And Kurt, I think he probably stayed in the town that he's from or whatever. So he's kind of small town boy type of situation. So he's never really went out to the world. So probably even more so with her life of being on adventure and stuff like that. Thinking about what their life could have been. All that is kind of gone, and it's heartbreaking. I think when there's already something there, I think especially in a society where this is such a huge thing, this is a large, Soul Connects, it's a large company, so this soulmate thing is worldwide, at least what we kind of see. So it's for it to be a situation where it's you lost your soulmate, you kind of get one and only, and so for them to be gone that, you can see how that could send some people. And so I thought that was kind of interesting to see that darker side to that. And obviously we learned that Kurt had tried to kill himself. They never really went into it, but I guess it seems like it's connected to because Heather wasn't alive anymore, he probably felt I want to be with her, so he tried to kill himself. They never really directly say that, but it's just because at first you're like, oh, maybe he tried to kill him, but it's it's heavily inferred. They don't actually directly say it in the episode, but I think it's heavily inferred with everything. It's just plain and simple, but still, his dad being oh yeah, I want you to take over, I'm going to be retiring soon, because I think his dad's working, obviously they work on a farm and everything, and he's I want you to do this, and he's but you have to put all this soulmate stuff behind you. I am, Dad. He's no, look me in the eyes and do it. He's I am, Dad. I'm done with all that soulmate stuff. But even though he says that, he isn't. What also, it's a theme in this episode, that it's something they bring up in the episode, and I think it's always kind of I'm not going to say what religious group specifically, because I'm ignorant when it comes to a lot of religions, so I don't want to associate what I'm about to say to any specific group, because I'm not well versed enough in different religions. I think there's a religious group I know that's at least I believe in my head that I believe it. But the whole thing of if you commit suicide, you're going to burn in hell, that's never sat right with me. Whatever, I'm not trying to get all nitpicky about religion and stuff it's just one of those things in particular that just never sat right with me, because it's someone killing themselves is because sadly they felt like they were boxed in, they had no other choices, and that they were desperate and alone, and so I feel saying someone's going to burn in hell, that it's a sin to kill yourself. To me, it just feels like you're demonizing someone for feeling hopeless. And so it's just never sat right with me. And it was interesting because in that group he was a part of, it's yeah, because Kurt, killing yourself isn't cool. I was did that dude just say that line of killing yourself isn't cool? It sounds like someone that's trying to tell you, hey, drugs are bad, okay? Get a little Mr. Mackey with it. But it's just oh, drugs they're not cool, Kurt. It's like the same way. It's like you're talking about killing yourself almost the same way you would talk about doing drugs. Drugs are bad, okay? Killing yourself is bad, okay? Like, so that was just kind of something I immediately latched onto. Like I said, I'm not trying to, like, shove my beliefs or anything down nobody's throats. I'm not trying to attack anyone's religion. It's just one of those things personally that's always bugged me in certain religions, that's a thing, that killing yourself is considered a sin. That's just something that bugged me. I mean, everyone's got their issues, when it comes, whatever the case may be. When it comes to, like, religion, everyone's got their stance, like, whether you're, like, fully in, or whether, you might have your other issues, whatever the case may be. And like I said, I'm not trying to get deep dive into it, but just because that came up in the episode, I figured I'd talk about it, regardless, but when it was all said and done, someone had reached out to him, and it was put this pin in, and it's like, come here if you want to see Heather. And basically, Kurt, well, I skipped over it. Kurt was at a meeting, and he met a lady, Martha, played by Malin Ackerman, who's been in, like, a shit ton of stuff. I think the first Harold and Kumar movie, I didn't realize that was her until I went back and saw the movie years later, and I was like, holy shit, that's Malin Ackerman. She's been in, like I said, she's been in a shit ton of stuff. You've seen her. I forget. I swear there was, like, a sitcom she was in. I feel like, and I feel like I remember her being in a sitcom. I don't remember. Huh? Maybe I'm just being crazy. Regardless, but the fact of the matter is, when it was all said and done, though, they kind of hit it off, and they're both like, because obviously they both lost their soulmates, and they're kind of talking about who their soulmates were and what they did, and they kind of bond over that a little bit. And they end up doing their thing, and then she finds out he's a virgin, and she's like, wait, what? Why didn't you tell me? I thought that was interesting she had that reaction, but later on she's like, oh my god, you're 25, you're not as young as I thought you were. Because I think that's what made her flip out, because she's like, wait, you're a virgin? She thought she hooked up with someone that was super young, but it turns out, like, oh, he's 25, so it was okay. She's like, oh, you're not as young as I thought you were, so it's good. But obviously it was so bad because he's apologizing. She's like, stop apologizing. He's like, can we exchange numbers? She's like, no. And she's like, no. He's like, oh, well, bye. It was just the most awkward situation. But obviously, circling back to it, going to that religious group, which is basically like a cult. And you were like, oh, this is because obviously they're like, which the message I can kind of get behind, where it's like, hey, suicide's not a sin. Like, once again, but it's like, obviously the whole point is for them to kill themselves. And she's like, oh, this is one of those drink the Kool-Aid and die type of cults. I mean, I'm sure maybe all cults are like, regardless, it was like, okay, you can kind of see the writing on the wall. Like, this is one that's like, oh, you want to be reunited with the people you love. Oh, then, so bring up this group. Obviously, Kurt ends up meeting a buddy named Travis. And they end up, obviously getting taken. And obviously it becomes like this whole test thing and everything. Like, first they have to take these. For one, it's like, oh, like, you deserve to be loved or whatever. And lo and behold, who does he run into? But Martha. And she's like, oh, shit. I mean, she's like, hey. And she's like, Curtis. He's like, Kurt. It's like, oh, you deserve it. Like, oh, yeah, you deserve love. And it's just this awkward meeting between them. But obviously the first dosing was like a test to see whether or not they were committed. Some people weren't, so those people got booted. But, it's like, who did you see? And then, Kurt's case, he saw Heather, but it was just the lady going near his phone, the moment she put his phone to his eye, I didn't know what that was going to be. Like, because at first I thought, like, okay, they're supposed to all be dead, and he ended up surviving, and she didn't expect him to, but it's like, no, like I said, it was a test to see whether they were committed or not. But it was interesting. He saw Heather, and he's like, oh, Travis, did you see the person you were looking for? He was like, I think her name was Loretta, and it's like, no, he saw his children. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So immediately Travis is the one that's kind of like, no, this isn't what because, eventually, they're talking to group and everything, and, well, him and Martha had their moment I thought was kind of interesting, where it's kind of like, hey, and he's helping her out and everything. And she's like, actually, our time together actually made me think, like, for her, it's like, because things were weird and awkward like they were between her and Kurt, it made her go like, it makes me feel like I want to be with that one person. So it made her even more so sure about this, being here right now. So it's like, yeah, which has got to add a layer of guilt to Kurt later on, because it's like, it's because of you she's here in the first place. But obviously he's in the same boat, so it's like, hey, and she's even like, oh, we'll be death buddies, and he's like, yeah, death buddies, So I thought, so, but you can kind of get the feeling like, okay, where their story was going to go. It actually kind of it's very, I mean, maybe this is inspired by it, but it feels very Romeo and Juliet. I don't know why I said that weird. Romeo and Juliet-esque is kind of what it definitely reminded me of. There, you know, Martha and Kurt's story, to a certain extent, obviously not the full extent. But then there's obviously the whole Travis situation, and obviously for him, it's like, you know, because obviously it's the whole thing of like they have to pretend to be each other's soulmates. So like Martha is pretending to be Heather for Kurt, and then he's being her soulmate, and it's just being like, you know, for him it's like the way you talk to people, like, you know, you're being there for people, kind of just be you. That the fact is you're just amazing because you just be you, and obviously it struck something. And Martha hearing him talk like that, he's like, oh, I'm sorry, did I say something wrong? But obviously Travis got set off because he's like, you're not her. He's like, I didn't even know her, so how the hell do you know her? And then when it came down to them talking and stuff like that, he was like, this is all bullshit, because they're being asked like, oh yeah, like sign over your accounts to us, you won't need it. And it's like, oh, that's not super shit. He's like, but why can't I keep, Travis is like, why can't I keep my money and give it to my kids? It's like, oh, because your kids, you don't even know where they are ever since you did what you did to their mom. And it's like, whoa, what was that about? And obviously it kind of shuts Travis down a little bit to the point he walks away. And obviously later on, you know, Kurt tries to find him and does find him. He had killed himself, which the rest of the group's not as mournful about it, just because it's like, well, he just went ahead. He wasn't strong enough to kind of wait with the rest of us. But the fact is that we're all going to go down that path with him. You know, the clock is ticking down to it. But obviously Kurt couldn't sleep, and neither could Martha. And, you know, them kind of getting close and everything and making out. Now, whether it was something more, you know, but them being in the hole and everything together. But you could tell Kurt was starting to second guess it, and Martha was like, no, you're a kid, you don't know anything, like, because he was saying, like, you know, basically it's like, because of all this, you know, he'd kind of given up, but Martha kind of gave him that spark again. And I think he'd done the same thing to her, but when the time came, like, she didn't want to have any, she's like, no, this is what I want to do. But at the end, she started having doubts herself, and obviously I was thinking, like, at the last second they weren't going to do it, but then they do it. I was like, are you actually going to straight up die? I was like, are you? Because I was like, if they die, I was like, this is going to be a super dark ass ending. And then the fact of the matter is, it's like they did. I was like, tell me this was like a test or something, that this wasn't real, or like what's going on here? And it's like, at the last second, like, they're walking and they grab each other's hands, and he's like, come with me, but it's like they start vomiting. It's like, oh no, this is real. I was like, dude. I was like, oh, because he's like, what made you change your mind? And she's like, you did, dummy. And they're running, and then, you know, obviously it starts taking effect. And obviously the people that are in charge of everything are driving away because this whole thing was a scam. It's like, we took it. Actually, we didn't. We took fake stuff to make it seem like we were with you, but it's like, all of you are going to die and we're going to take off with your money, which is like, that's super dark. And so you have like Kurt and her there vomiting and stuff like that, and them holding each other's hands being like, you know, death buddies. And I'm like, dude, I was like, we're going to end this episode like this? Hell, his family will probably never know, because obviously, like, their phones were taken, so, like, he hasn't been in contact with his mom or dad. They don't know what the hell happened to him. I'm sure it's already been bad enough because, like, obviously they went through the whole, like, scare of, like, him trying to kill himself, and obviously it's like, it'll probably be a while before they end up finding these bodies, and those people got away with everything. And as, you know, she's dying and he's dying, he sees Heather and she slaps him to wake him up, and it's just like, holy shit. You know, so it's whether that was his subconscious, whether that was Heather trying to get him to wake up, you know, you can take whatever you want from that. But he gets up, takes her, and I love that Martha's kind of throwing up, and he's like, could you stop throwing in my hair? She's like, sorry. Stops that dude. That dude crashes, gets knocked out, put him in the passenger seat, put her in the back seat, literally dying, and you're driving them to the hospital. Luckily, he gets there in time, and they're both vomiting, and he's, you know, trying to keep her awake, and she's like, life buddies. He's like, life buddies. Luckily, the nurses and stuff get there in time, and you're like, oh my god. And then what happens? The episode ends. I was like, fuck you. I was like, no, you didn't do that. It makes sense. It's an anthology, but I'm like, stop doing it. Just give me a little bit more. Because I'm one of those people that's like, Yeah, you can leave some stuff unanswered. Honestly, I want a lot of damn answers. I'm one of those people. I need a lot of if you can give me a conclusive enough ending where I end up forgetting, like, once again, it's that thing of like Lost. People didn't like Lost ending. I did, mainly because any questions I had, I completely forgot, especially because it's been years. It's been a couple years since I watched Lost, so a lot of questions I did have at the time probably disappeared. I was just along for the ride, so the ending was very satisfying to me. Once again, I had a different viewing experience because I saw it all at once on Netflix, whereas other people had to wait weeks from week to week, and then eventually like months in between seasons and all that. Regardless, tensions and all that, blah 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 blah. But it's just that thing of like leaving you hanging where you don't know what's up. I mean, to be fair, every story literally ends like that. It's actually interesting because each story has, like, I feel like these past 3 episodes have been a little more hopeful in their endings. Episode 1 was just kind of a little ambiguous, because it's like, oh, will they, they're with their soulmates. Will they, there's still something there. Will they get back together? Episode 2 ended up being, like I said, the drama thriller that it was, where it's like, oh, exposing Home Dude for being the piece of shit that he was. Then episode 3, it's kind of like it's a little more like, hey, we have this relationship situation. There's going to be 4 people in this relationship. Hey, how will things look later down the road? And in episode 4, I brought it up earlier. It's like a very like romance comedy. To me, out of anyone, it's like 3, 4, and maybe this seemed the most hopeful, because at least with this, like at the end of the day, Martha and Kurt, I think they're not going to be doing this anymore, because it's once again that the soulmate situation. It's like, oh, it says this is your person's your soulmate, but you find someone else. But will it work out? No. I mean, not no, but you don't know. No one knows. I mean, that's the beauty of life. You never know. Some people are in your life, as they say, for like the seasons, and some people are meant to be in your life forever. It just, some people are just brought into your life to teach you a lesson, and it's like, it's an effed up, way to look at it. But the whole Heather situation put him in this position where he no longer is looking to die. He's looking to live now, him and Martha, and they found each other through that, so life buddies, now whether it becomes like a full-blown relationship, maybe it won't work out, but whatever the case may be, I think this gave them a new lease on life. And it also presents an opportunity for you to get those mother effers busted for literally killing a whole bunch of people, because I assume the rest of those people are dead. Like Martha and Kurt might be the only ones that are alive. Maybe not. Maybe they can tell them like, oh, those people are in this direction. Maybe they can get to them in time. Maybe not. That's why it can be extra dark. So there could be a spark of hope for them, but then kind of a dark story for everyone else. But at the same time, it's like we're not getting caught up in an aspect of like. Because that's also a thing, too, like, it makes you wonder, could there ever be legal action taken against Sulkiness? I mean, it's not their fault, necessarily, but maybe the argument, there could be probably some, like, legal jargon that allows for, like, there to be legal action taken. I don't know. But it once again, the whole situation gets your mind wondering about, like, well, what would be the next step? Where would the episode go? But I think it's like, it tells this compact story, and it's like, that's it. You can always imagine, like I said, I'd like to imagine, the happily ever after, but the whole point isn't the happily ever after. It is, we told this story, what happens next? It's up to you to decide kind of situation. Do you want to go pessimistic? Do you want to go super pessimistic? Or do you want to be a little optimistic? I like to be a little optimistic. Even though this episode definitely leans towards the possibilities of super pessimism in many different regards. But, like I said, being the pessimistic guy, I want to, lean into my optimistic tendencies. But nevertheless, it was a really, really interesting episode on so many levels. Like I said, I love how, like, I mean, once again, I don't watch enough anthologies, but, so I'm sure this applies to other anthologies as well, but it's just like, for this core concept to be like, Soul Connects to be the through line, but for you to see so many different lives. I mean, because it's like, everyone's lives are going to be different. Everyone's relationships are always going to be different, and I like how that's reflected where this Soul Connects thing can work out for people. But I mean, truth be told is, when we've seen this Soul Connects thing work out for anyone in this episode, in this series so far, no, it's kind of hasn't necessarily. It's kind of showing you the flaws in it, but also more so like, but then again, it's like, maybe that's the point. Like, this is a sure thing, but it turns out this sure thing led you to something that was a better, whether it be the whole situation last episode or episode 3, or maybe it's a situation where it's meant to put you in a position where, like, oh, this is something you thought was better for you, but what you don't appreciate what you had until it's gone type of thing. there's many lessons and morals that could be taken from it, that maybe those are what's really meant to be the point of these Soul Connects, or maybe it is legitimate, like, oh, maybe the Soul Connects has like a 99% success rate, and we are literally just seeing the 0.1% of it just not working out. I mean, maybe it's just a point. Well, because obviously the percentages have to be affected by the fact is that some people's soulmates died. So who's to say it would have worked out or not? Because obviously we've seen with the soulmates thing, even people who found their soulmates didn't work out. Especially like episode 3, there was a lot of compatibility issues all around. So that ended up being a thing. Regardless, this whole episode, just like I said, it kind of gets your mind wondering, So I'm curious to see where, all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.